All he heard was a woman crying, high off the ground with no way down. She was tied up in a cottonwood tree, her wrists burned red by rope, her dress torn just enough to shame her in the open sun. Her legs were bound wrong, cruelly wrong, and the summer wind kept lifting the fabric she tried to hide behind. When she saw him, her face flushed with panic and humiliation, and she shouted the only words she had left, "Don't look there." He didn't look the way they wanted him to. He looked long enough to cut her down and to see the trap. Ezekiel's heart froze beneath that tree, one hand still on the fence post, the other drifting toward his holster without thinking. He was 49 years old, and he had lived long enough to know when trouble wasn't looking for help, but for witnesses. The Wyoming sun beat down hard, the kind of heat that made men irritable and horses stubborn, and he knew this land well enough to feel when it had turned hostile. The woman struggled again. The branch creaked, and the rope bit deeper into her skin. She turned her face away from him, teeth clenched, trying to protect what little dignity she had left. Zeke told himself to look away. He told himself this was none of his business, because minding your own land kept you alive out here. But he didn't turn his head. He looked. Because a man can't untie a knot he refuses to see. Her name, she said between shallow breaths, was Clara Delaney. She was 21, new to Wyoming, and every word came out like it cost her something. She said she hadn't fallen, hadn't wandered into this, and hadn't been spared by accident. That this was done to her on purpose. Zeke cut the rope slow, careful not to drop her. Careful not to make her feel any smaller than she already did. When her boots hit the ground, her knees buckled, and she grabbed the front of his shirt just to stay upright. He didn't touch her more than he had to. He kept his eyes level, fixed on the horizon, because she had asked him not to look, and because some requests matter more than others. He kept his gaze off her body, because shame wasn't hers to carry. That was when he felt it. The weight of another set of eyes, somewhere out beyond the tall grass. Zeke straightened, heart tightening, and scanned the land the way a man does when he knows he's already late. Nothing moved, but that didn't mean no one was there. Clara saw the change in his face. "They're close," she whispered. "They didn't leave me like that to die." Zeke understood then, with a sick calm that surprised him. This wasn't a random cruelty. It was bait. And the horrifying part wasn't what he saw. It was what he had to do next, go to war with the men wearing the law. If you want more true Old West stories told plain, hit subscribe right now, because this one only gets darker from here. And tell me, do you like stories about lawmen, outlaws, or quiet ranchers who get dragged into trouble they never wanted? They left her high and exposed on purpose, to break her, and to see who was foolish enough to cut her down. He took her to his ranch without asking permission, because asking would have wasted time they didn't have. The ride was quiet, broken only by the sound of leather and breath, and the way Clara kept her arms folded tight across herself. She didn't cry anymore. That worried him more than the crying had. At the ranch, Zeke gave her water, a clean shirt, and space. He stood outside while she changed, staring at the barn wall like it held answers. When she stepped out, she looked older somehow, like the day had taken something from her and replaced it with resolve. That was when Silas Crow rode in. Silas lived a mile west, close enough to wave at, far enough to never truly know. He smiled too easily, asked too many questions, and let his eyes linger just a second too long on Clara. Zeke felt something cold settle in his chest. Silas said he'd heard shouting earlier. Silas said folks should look out for one another. Silas said he could fetch the sheriff if needed. Zeke thanked him and watched him ride away, counting the seconds until the dust settled. Clara waited until Silas was gone before she spoke again. "He's the reason," she said. "He didn't do it himself, but he knows who did." That night, Zeke didn't sleep. He sat at the table, rifle across his knees, replaying the moment beneath that tree. He knew the law would ask questions he couldn't answer cleanly. He knew the town would whisper before it listened. And he knew that by looking, by cutting that rope, he had stepped into something that wouldn't let him walk back out. The wind rattled the windows just before dawn. Zeke stood and checked the yard, hand
Stay with me right here. If this moment has you holding your breath, tap like and subscribe and tell me, was that the only choice he had?
tight on his rifle. Nothing was there, but he knew better now than to trust empty land. So here's the question that hangs over everything that follows. When a man sees something he was never meant to witness, does doing the right thing make him a hero? Or does it just make him the next target Zeke woke before the sun, the way he always did? But the ranch felt different that morning. Not louder, not quieter, just wrong in a way a man can't put a finger on. Clara was already up, sitting at the small table with a tin cup of coffee she hadn't touched. She wore the clean shirt Zeke had given her, sleeves rolled too far down like she was trying to disappear inside it. Her eyes kept drifting toward the window, then back to the door, like she was counting how many ways trouble could come in. Zeke cooked eggs and bacon without asking if she was hungry. Out here, food was an offer, not a question. She ate slow, careful, like she didn't trust the day yet. He didn't ask her to explain everything. Men who ask too early don't get the truth. They get whatever version helps someone survive the moment. After breakfast, Zeke saddled the horses. He told her they were going into Laramie. By sundown, folks would say he stole a girl. That lie was the real rope. He ran a hand down the mare's neck, checked the cinch twice, and tightened a loose strap like it was a habit older than his mood. A lonely ranch teaches you one thing: small things fail first. Then big things do. She didn't argue. That worried him too. The ride was quiet at first. Dust rose behind them, hanging in the air like it didn't know where to go. Clara rode stiff, one hand tight on the reins, the other gripping the saddle horn like she was afraid Wyoming might buck her off if she loosened her hold. Halfway there, she spoke without looking at him. "I didn't come here looking for trouble." Zeke nodded. Eyes forward. Most folks don't. She told him she'd arrived in Cheyenne by train, then headed west, hoping to find a man who'd stopped writing home. Her brother. Rail work. Temporary jobs that turned permanent quiet. She said she asked the wrong questions of the wrong people, and someone decided she'd be worth more somewhere else. Zeke didn't need the details spelled out. He'd seen that look before, usually on women who didn't stay long enough to learn the names of the streets. When Laramie came into view, Clara slowed her horse. Her shoulders tensed, like the town itself had teeth. Zeke told her to stay close, and for once, she listened. The street smelled like dust, sweat, and yesterday's whiskey. Men looked up when they passed, some curious, some calculating. A few smiled in ways that weren't friendly at all. Zeke felt it then, that old instinct, the one that said someone had already talked. They hadn't made it to the general store when a familiar voice drifted across the street. "Morning." Zeke. Silas Crow leaned against a hitching post like he owned the ground under it. Hat clean, boots polished. Smile easy. He looked Clara over, not boldly, not rude, just long enough to make Zeke's jaw tighten. Silas asked if everything was all right. Said he'd heard shouting out near the river yesterday. Said folks should look out for one another. Zeke said they were fine. Silas nodded. Like that answered something he hadn't said out loud. Then Silas mentioned the sheriff, casual. Friendly. Like it was a favor. That was when Zeke noticed the deputy across the street watching them a little too closely. The man looked away when Zeke met his eyes, but not fast enough. Inside the store, Clara stayed near the door. A woman behind the counter gave her a look that wasn't unkind, but wasn't safe either. In towns like this, sympathy didn't pay rent. Zeke bought supplies he didn't need just to buy time. Outside, Silas was still there, waiting. The sheriff arrived before Zeke could suggest leaving. He wasn't angry. That was worse. He asked questions slow, like he already knew some of the answers. Where had Zeke found the girl? Why was she with him? Did she have family? Did she have papers? Clara tried to speak. The sheriff held up a hand, not unkindly, but firm. He said vagrancy laws existed for a reason. Said young women wandering alone tended to end up in trouble. Zeke heard the trap close before Clara did. He saw Silas watching from the shade, patient as a man waiting on an overdue debt. The sheriff said Clara could stay the night in custody, just until things were sorted, just procedure. Zeke knew better. So did Clara. Once she saw the look on the deputy's face, that was when the first shove came. A hand on Zeke's shoulder, not hard, but meant to guide him away. Zeke didn't swing. He stepped aside and used the man's weight against him, just enough to make a point. The street went quiet. Too quiet. Someone laughed nervously. Someone else spat. Zeke took Clara's
Right now, everything hangs on this moment. Subscribe if you're locked into this story and leave a comment. Would you have done the same?
arm and moved, fast, not running. Running meant guilt. They mounted up under a cloud of looks and whispers. And Zeke knew by the time they reached the edge of town, the story would already be changing. By nightfall, he wouldn't be the man who helped a stranger. He'd be the rancher who stole a girl. They rode hard until the town fell behind them, the land opening up like it always did, wide and indifferent. Clara finally spoke when the road bent toward the east. They're not going to stop. Zeke didn't answer right away. He was too busy realizing something else. Silas hadn't hurried. Men who hurry are afraid. Silas had all the time in the world. Zeke kept his eyes on the trail, but his mind kept circling one thought. Silas did not ride like a man chasing a runaway. He rode like a man collecting something that already belonged to him. Clara shifted in the saddle, then reached into her pocket and pulled out a small brass button. It had a rail company mark pressed into it, worn smooth around the edges. My brother had this. She said, he said, if he ever vanished, this would tell me where to start looking. Zeke took it for a second, felt the warmth of her hand still on the metal, then gave it back. Keep it, he said. A man needs something real when the whole world starts telling him lies. Behind them, the wind carried a faint sound, not voices, not hooves, just the dry hush of grass being parted. Zeke did not turn around. He only touched the rifle across his saddle and kept riding. They didn't slow down until the land flattened and the road thinned into two pale lines cutting through the grass. Zeke finally eased his horse to a walk when he knew Laramie was far enough behind them to start lying about what had happened. Clara rode with her chin up now. Fear was still there, but something else had settled in beside it. Anger, maybe, or understanding. Zeke knew that look. It was the moment when a person realizes the world isn't confused. It's decided. They stopped near a low draw where the wind cut the heat just enough to breathe. Zeke watered the horses and checked the cinch without rushing. If someone was following, hurrying would only make it worse. Claire broke the silence. They were going to lock me up, she said. Not a question. Zeke nodded. Just for the night, he said, and just long enough. She didn't ask long enough for what. She already knew. They pushed east again, following the rough path that paralleled the rail grade. Clara rode closer, then spoke low, like the words might draw trouble if they got too loud. I asked a clerk at the station about my brother. She said he told me nothing, but his eyes told me everything. Zeke nodded once. I have seen that look, he said. It is the look of a man who knows the truth costs more than his pay. Clara swallowed, then forced herself to keep talking. He slipped me a warning. He said, don't wait for daylight and don't trust a badge just because it shines. Zeke felt his jaw tighten. That is the kind of warning men give when they already tried the safe way, he said. Every few miles, Zeke checked their back trail. Nothing obvious, which meant nothing good. As the afternoon dragged on, Clara started talking. Not all at once, just pieces. She told him about the man at the Cheyenne station who offered to help with directions, about another who watched from across the platform, never close enough to notice, never far enough to forget, about how she learned to stop trusting kindness that came too quickly. Zeke listened without turning his head. Men who interrupt stories don't hear the truth. Near a shallow creek, Zeke spotted tracks that didn't belong to cattle or travelers. Fresh, 2 horses, riding light. He felt that cold settle again, the one that starts in the gut and works its way up slow. They moved on without stopping. If someone was testing their pace, he wasn't going to answer back. By late afternoon, the heat had baked the land into something brittle. The sky stretched wide and empty, like it didn't care who crossed beneath it. That was when the shot came. It cracked sharp and fast, kicking dust just ahead of Zeke's horse. Not meant to hit, meant to speak. Zeke pulled Clara down into the grass and rolled with her without a word. He stayed low, heart steady, counting breaths. Another shot rang out. Closer this time. Zeke saw them then. 3 riders, one hung.
Don't look away. If you felt that silence, hit like and subscribe and tell me, who do you trust after this?
Back, 2 moved wide. He recognized the pattern before he recognized the men. This wasn't a robbery. This was a retrieval. Zeke fired once, not to kill, just to force space. The riders shifted. Surprised, but not scared. That was when he saw the badge. Small. Metal catching the sun, pinned to the vest of the man who stayed back. Zeke felt something snap inside him. Not anger. Disappointment. Zeke had worked around lawmen once, long ago, close enough to learn that a badge could mean duty, or it could mean cover. He hated that he couldn't tell which one he was looking at right now. He'd lived his life believing the badge meant a line you didn't cross. Now here it was, riding with men who'd strung a girl up like bait. The fight didn't last long. Zeke used the creek bank and the brush the way the land taught him to. He didn't chase. He didn't boast. He only moved when he had to. One rider went down hard, winded and swearing. Another fled. The man with the badge hesitated just long enough to make a mistake. Zeke closed the distance and knocked him flat with the rifle butt before he could raise his gun. The badge clattered in the dirt, dull and ordinary. For a moment, Zeke stared at it, a piece of metal that had cost people their trust. He left it where it fell. They rode again before the dust settled. No talking, no looking back. As the sun dipped lower, Clara finally spoke. "You didn't hesitate," she said. Zeke shrugged. "I did." He said, "Just not long enough to get us killed." They reached a small rise where the land opened toward the east. The rail line shimmered in the distance like a promise that might lie. Clara stopped her horse. "There's something you need to know," she said. Zeke waited. She reached into her satchel and pulled out a folded piece of oilcloth. Inside were names, numbers, places. Not neat, not official, but real enough to scare the wrong people. My brother copied it quick, one night, and hid it where a man would not think to search. "I wasn't supposed to keep this," she said. "But once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it." Zeke felt the weight of the day press harder. This wasn't about a girl anymore. This was about a chain that ran farther than either of them could see. He folded the cloth back and handed it to her. "Then we don't lose it," he said. The wind shifted, somewhere behind them. A horse whinnied. Zeke turned slowly, eyes scanning the long road back, because now he knew something else too. The men coming after them weren't guessing anymore. They knew exactly where to look next. Zeke did not stop riding until the light began to thin and the land stretched flatter ahead of them. The rail line stayed off to their left now, far enough to hear at times, close enough to remind them where they were headed. Cheyenne was still a long way off, but running without a direction only made you tired and stupid. They slowed near a patch of broken ground where old ties and scrap wood marked a forgotten work camp. Zeke checked the horses and let them breathe. Clara sat quiet, watching him the way people do when they are trying to decide if someone is worth trusting all the way. He finally spoke. "We stay ahead of them," he said. "But we do not outrun our thinking." She nodded. That was new. At first she had followed because she had no better choice. Now she followed because she understood what was chasing them. They rode on again as the dusk settled in. The heat broke just enough to make the air feel heavy instead of sharp. Zeke felt it in his bones. Night was coming, and with it the kind of decisions a man remembers longer than he wants to. They reached a low ridge that overlooked a shallow cut where the trail narrowed. Zeke reined in and studied the ground. Tracks again, fresh, closer together now. "They are not rushing," Clara said quietly. Zeke shook his head. "No," he said. "They are closing." He guided them off the main path and into a stand of scrub that hid them from the open ground. He dismounted and checked the rifle. Slow and deliberate. Clara watched his hands, steady as fence posts. That was when the first shout came. Not loud, not angry. Just close enough to tell them they were not alone anymore. Zeke pushed Clara down behind a fallen beam and took a knee. The sound of hooves drifted closer, then split. 2 riders this time, one wide, one straight on. Zeke waited until he saw shapes, not guesses. He fired once, low, kicking dirt and forcing the lead rider to pull up hard. The second shot came back fast, snapping past his ear. This one was closer, more confident. Zeke felt the moment before it happened.
This is where things turn deadly. Stay with the channel, like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments, whose side are you on right now?
That quiet click in his head when the world narrows. A man rushed from the left, too fast, thinking fear would win before aim did. Zeke swung the rifle and struck him across the shoulder, then again, driving him down into the dust. Clara snatched the fallen man's revolver, held it low, and fired one warning shot into the dirt. Not to play hero, just to buy Zeke 2 seconds of breathing room. Her voice came out steady when she said, "Move." The man rolled, gasping. Trying to reach for his gun, Zeke saw the badge then. Pinned, crooked, tarnished. For half a second he hesitated. That was all the world allowed. Another rider surged forward, gun raised. Zeke fired without thinking. The horse reared and the rider fell hard, screaming but alive. The sound echoed off the ridge and vanished into the open land. Silence followed, the kind that presses on your ears. Zeke stood there, breathing, the rifle heavy in his hands. He had just fired on men wearing law, not all of them. But enough. Out here, one story could hang a man quicker than a rope, and Zeke knew whose story would get told first. Claire stood slowly, eyes wide, not frightened now, but awake. "They will call you something for this," she said. Zeke nodded. "They already have." They did not linger. They mounted and rode east again, faster now, the night wrapping around them like a decision already made. By the time they reached the outskirts of Buford, the stars were sharp overhead, and the air had turned cooler than the day had any right to be. Buford was little more than a stop, a place where men changed horses and pretended it meant something. Zeke did not take them in. He kept them moving. Just past town, they stopped again. Clara reached into her satchel and pulled out the oilcloth. She unfolded it under the moonlight. Zeke leaned close. Names, dates, amounts. Not neat enough to be official. Too careful to be nothing. "This is why they want me," she said. My brother saw this first. He worked near Cheyenne, clerking, writing numbers for men who did not want to be seen writing them. Zeke felt the pieces settle, the bait, the badge, the patience. He disappeared. She continued. "I came looking. I asked questions. And then they decided I was easier to sell than silence." Zeke folded the cloth and handed it back. "This goes to someone who can read it without flinching," he said. She looked at him. "Who would that be, Marshal?" Zeke said, "In Cheyenne." They rode again, slower now, careful to keep the rail to their side and the darkness ahead of them. Zeke felt the weight of every mile. He was no longer just protecting a stranger. He was carrying a truth men killed for. Near dawn, they stopped once more. The land dipped and rose like a held breath. Zeke scanned the horizon. "There is something else," Clara said. He waited. "They will not stop even if we reach Cheyenne," she said. "Not unless we force them to." Zeke looked east where the sky was beginning to pale. He thought of his ranch, the quiet mornings, the rules he had lived by. Those were gone now. He swung back into the saddle and set his course, because somewhere ahead, men were already planning how to take this back from him. And for the first time, Zeke knew exactly where this road was leading. By the time the rails finally led them into Cheyenne, both horses were lathered and both riders looked like they hadn't slept in a week. Zeke kept telling himself that once they reached a marshal, The running would end. They reached Cheyenne as the town was waking up, the kind of morning where the air still held a little mercy before the heat took it away. Before they crossed into town, Zeke pulled them behind a stack of ties near the rail yard and waited. Clara looked at him like he had gone stubborn again. Zeke shook his head. Not stubborn, he said. Careful. A rider passed on the main street, slow, scanning faces like he was shopping. The man wore a clean hat, and he kept one hand near his coat, not resting, ready. Clara's breath caught. That is one of them, she whispered. Zeke watched the rider's eyes, the way they did not settle on buildings, only on people. He waited until the rider was gone, then he moved them forward. Cheyenne is big, Zeke said, but big towns have small corners, and small corners are where men disappear. Clara nodded once, then tucked her hair under her hat and sat taller. If she was going to be seen, she would be seen on her own terms. Zeke slowed the horses before the first buildings, not wanting to arrive like a man being chased, even if that was exactly what he was. Cheyenne looked bigger than Laramie, louder too. Rail cars sat like tired animals along the line. Men moved with
Remember this moment. Subscribe and like the video so you don't miss what follows, and tell me, what do you think comes next?
purpose here. Not because they were honest, but because money had taught them how. Claire stayed close to Zeke as they rode in. She had learned the shape of danger by now. It wore clean coats and spoke softly. Zeke headed straight for the marshal office near the rail yards. He did not stop for coffee. He did not stop for food. Delaying only helped the people who wanted them quiet. The man behind the desk looked up slow when they entered. Older, broad-shouldered, eyes that had seen too many men lie badly. His name was Tom Greeley, United States Marshal. Zeke said his own name and waited. The marshal studied him for a moment, then nodded like he had filed the name away somewhere years ago. Clara stood stiff beside him. She did not speak until the marshal asked her to. Zeke laid the oilcloth on the desk. He did not open it. Men who open things too early lose control of the room. Greeley asked where they got it. Zeke told him just enough to make the truth heavy. The marshal finally unfolded the cloth and read without comment. His eyes moved slow. Once he stopped breathing for a second, when he finished, he folded it back up and placed it flat on the desk like it might bite. "This is trouble," Greeley said. And it wasn't new trouble either. Just the first time it had shown up in his office with a name attached. Not angry, not impressed, just certain. Clara spoke then. She told him about her brother, about the numbers, about the men who followed her, about the tree. She did not cry. That seemed to matter. Greeley listened until she was done. Then he leaned back and looked at Zeke again. "You understand what you have done," he said. Zeke nodded. "I do." "You fired on men wearing badges," the marshal said. Zeke nodded again. "Some badges are just decoration," he said. That earned him a thin smile. Greeley told them the truth plain. Cheyenne had laws, but laws here moved slow. If Silas Crow was as deep as the paper suggested, he would not fall from words alone. "We need him in the open," Greeley said. "Doing what he always does." Clara understood before Zeke did. She went still, then lifted her chin like she'd already made peace with fear. "You want me seen," she said. "Fine, but it's my choice, not theirs." The marshal did not deny it. Zeke felt something twist in his chest, that he had already dragged her through more than he wanted to answer for. "No," he said. Greeley met his eyes. "You brought her here," he said. "That means you brought this with her." Silence settled heavy. Clara stepped forward. "They will keep coming," she said. "If not for me, then for the paper." Zeke wanted to argue. He wanted to take her somewhere quiet and disappear back into the kind of life that ended before dawn and started with chores. But that life was already gone. Greeley laid out the plan. He did not dress it up, and he did not promise safety. He pointed to a rough map and tapped the rail line east of town. "That camp is empty," he said. "Empty places make honest traps, because there are fewer mouths to sell the wrong story." Zeke looked at the map, then at Clara. Greeley saw it and lowered his voice. "If you want to walk away, do it now," he said. "Once Silas sees her, he will not stop at taking her back." Clara answered before Zeke could. "I'm done running," she said, "and I'm done being handled like freight. Simple enough to sound foolish, a false meeting, a handoff. Witnesses waiting close but unseen, Silas would come. Men like him always did when money and control were on the table. Clara would be bait. Zeke would be close. The marshal would do the rest. They left the office without shaking hands. Greeley sent a telegram back to Laramie, and the next reply came faster than Zeke expected. Sheriff Owen Briggs was coming, not as a favor, but because the paper gave him no place left to hide. This was not the kind of business that needed courtesy. They waited the rest of the day in a rented room above a feed store. The window looked down on the street. Zeke watched everything. Clara sat on the bed, turning the oilcloth over and over in her hands. She finally laughed once, soft, short. "I came here thinking I would find answers," she said. "Instead, I found a man who does not know when to walk away." Zeke smiled without humor. "I knew," he said. "I just did not think it would be today." As evening came on, word reached them through Greeley. Silas had arrived in Cheyenne. He had not come quietly. The meeting was set for the following night. A section camp east of town, long abandoned, a place where men used to sleep and now only secrets did. Zeke checked his rifle and then checked it again. He did not enjoy this. He respected it. Clara watched him. "You will not let them take me," she said. Zeke met her eyes. "No," he said. "I will not." Night settled in thick and close. Zeke did not sleep. He sat in the chair and listened to the town breathe. He thought about the ranch and about mornings without decisions. About a life where right and wrong did not share a table. A man can lose a lot out here. Land, sleep, peace. But if he loses his line, he's got nothing left worth keeping. Clara finally lay down. Before she slept, she spoke once more. "If this goes wrong," she said, "promise me something." Zeke waited. "Promise me you will finish it," she said. "Not for me, for the ones who never made it this far." Zeke did not answer right away. Then he nodded. Outside, a train whistle cut the night. Long, low. Zeke stood and looked out the window toward the dark stretch of land where tomorrow would happen, because now the trap was set. And the only thing left to learn was which man would walk away from it. They rode out to the section camp the next evening, with the sun hanging low and red, the kind of light that made everything look honest, even when it was not. The camp sat quiet beside the rail line, a few leaning boards and a broken stove marking where men once slept and dreamed small dreams. Now it was just a place people forgot, which made it perfect for the kind of business that did not want witnesses. Zeke reined in 100 yards out and studied the ground. Tracks were already there. Silas had not been late. Men like him never were. Claire stayed on her horse, spine straight, eyes forward. She looked calm, but Zeke knew better. Courage was not the absence of fear. It was deciding what mattered more than it. They rode in slow. Silas stepped out from behind one of the sheds like he had been there all his life. Clean coat, easy smile. Confidence that came from believing the world always bent his way. Madame Lottie May appeared next, flanked by two men who did not bother hiding their hands. She looked Claire over, like a seamstress judging cloth. Silas spoke first. He said Zeke had made things difficult. He said difficulties could be fixed. He said men only got hurt when they refused simple solutions. Zeke listened. He always did. Silas reached for the oilcloth. That was his mistake. The night cracked open with voices and boots and steel. Marshal Greeley stepped into the lantern light with his men behind him, calm as Sunday morning. They had been there before sunset, sitting quiet in the dark, waiting for Silas to show his own hand. The sheriff from Laramie was there too, pale and stiff, realizing too late which side of the line he had been standing on. Silas froze. For the first time, his smile did not know what to do. What followed was fast and ugly, the kind of fast that leaves your hands shaking after. One man lunged, and Zeke took an elbow across the ribs that made his breath turn sharp. Guns came up, boots slid in the dust, and for a few seconds it felt like the whole West was balanced on a trigger. Then Marshal Greeley's men closed in, hard and clean, and the weapons hit the ground one by one. Men who had spoken loudly yesterday suddenly found their throats tight with excuses. Zeke did not rush Silas. He did not shout. He just stood there and watched the man shrink under the weight of daylight truth. Claire stepped forward and handed the oilcloth to the marshal. Her hand did not shake, but her breath did, just once, before she steadied it. Silas looked at Zeke then, really looked. And for a moment, Zeke thought the man might say something honest. He did not. They took Silas away along with the others, the sound of boots fading into the night. Zeke stood still, pressing a palm to his side, not wanting Clara to see how bad that elbow had landed. He wasn't trying to look tough. He just didn't want her carrying one more thing on her shoulders. Madame Lottie May said nothing at all. Some people know when words only make things worse. When it was done, the camp fell quiet again, just wind and creaking boards and the far-off sound of a train passing through without stopping. Marshal Greeley came over and offered Zeke his hand. Zeke took it. Nothing more needed saying. Clara stood beside him, breathing in slow. She looked smaller now that it was over, like the fight had been holding her up. They rode back toward town together, not speaking. Some moments were better left alone. By morning, the story had already changed a dozen times. That was fine. Truth did not need permission to last. Zeke walked Clara to the edge of the street near the station. She watched the trains come and go for a long minute. She did not leave. Instead, she turned back toward him and smiled, the kind of smile that comes after something survives. Not bright, real. They talked about nothing important at first. Weather, horses, work that needed doing. Then she asked if he could use help at the ranch. Zeke said yes before thinking too hard about it. Life did not return to what it had been. It never does. But mornings came easier. The ranch felt less empty. And Zeke learned something he had not known before. Loneliness was not cured by company. It was cured by purpose. He still heard her voice sometimes. Don't look there. And he knew the real question was why a good man chooses to look anyway. Clara stayed, not because she was saved, but because she chose where she stood. And Zeke kept living by the rule that had cost him everything and given him something better. When you see wrong, you do not look away just to stay comfortable. If this story stayed with you, take a second to like the video and subscribe to the channel. These old stories matter, and the only way they keep getting told is if people like you keep listening. And here's the question worth carrying with you. If you saw something that demanded your courage, would you step forward knowing it would change your life, or would you turn your head and hope someone else did it instead? That choice is older than the West, and it still shows up in a man's life when he least expects it. Zeke stood on his porch at sunrise, rifle resting easy on his shoulder, and Clara beside him, quiet as the land. The horizon didn't promise peace, but for the first time in a long time, it didn't feel empty either.